A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. And tonight we'll be discussing, among other issues, President Yoweri Museveni has been moving through the region in Angola, in Tanzania. What exactly is he trying to broker as he continues to play the role he has played before of regional kingmaker, if that is the case. But many Ugandans will be focusing on and have been focusing on the life and history of a man who started out poor and grew to become extremely successful. The death of Aramali Kamali, aka Mukwano, and the business he left. I think the various figures have been reported. What we can state for fact is, for certain, I think the New Vision says his businesses were turning in up to 3.7 trillion. I think about, on average, about 3.7 trillion. I don't know what percentage of our national budget that is. We have a budget of 40.5 trillion. So if one business controls about what percentage, Dictor? What percentage?
Well, I wouldn't focus on the percentage of the budget. I'd focus on its contribution to GDP, because that money is it's our contribution to GDP, not revenues per se.
Yes.
So I would it's not that big, but considering that Mukwano is, I think there was a ranking of African brands, and it's the only one from Uganda that made the top 100. So it's a big deal. It is a big deal.
And a few years ago, the Mukwano group of companies used to run an advert. One, apart from the arrows pointing from Uganda into the rest of the region, especially sub-Saharan Africa, they also used to say every household has a Mukwano product in it. And I think that's big as they come. My question would be, what makes people like that? What branch are those kinds of people cut from? Where they begin from and where they grow. I'll also be discussing. Jospeh Kabuleta has been a guest on this show, arrested. He's one on a growing list of people arrested by security agencies in this country for annoying the person of the president of the Republic of Uganda. Sunday Monitor has the most interesting headline. Yeah? In the name, arrested in the name of Museveni. And the list has been growing. I'll be discussing that. And also, of course, this whole idea of the thing that bubbles under the surface of this country, provided once sparks provide a discussion of it, which is the question of our tribal ethnic cohesion in this country, where we have a law against sectarianism, but every time an incident happens, and in this case it's been incidents that are unfortunate killings involving death of Ugandans, you see this bubbling up, coming up. How do we deal with that? I have with me in studio tonight, I have Dictor Simwe. She writes for the East African newspaper. And I also have Lydia Namono, who is business editor, deputy business editor at the Daily Monitor. Very nice to have you, ladies.
Thank you, Charles.
We'll be joined by Jeff Mbanga later on in the discussion. Let's start with this business story, because many people don't discuss it that way. In the passing of Mukwano, you realize that the discussion is about the legacy he's built. Actually, very few people know the late Aramali Kamali. But everybody knows Mukwano, and they don't know who it was. But because of that ability to be present in your face, in everything that you do, when you ask people who have built and defined an actual legacy, he is at the epitome of that. Lydia, let me start with you. From business, we're talking about the numbers. What's the size of the economy, Dictor?
Over 100, okay, $25 billion.
$25 billion. $25 billion translates into about slightly over 100 trillion Uganda shillings.
Yes.
So if one individual can be said to be responsible for 3 trillion, that's
for
significant.
4, really, if you round it off.
Yeah, if you round it off. 4 trillion out of an economy of 100 trillion. That's not insignificant.
No, it is very, very significant. And the thing that you have to respect about this gentleman is that he did all this without getting so many concessions that we have come to associate with investors, because almost all our investors have been involved in government giving them money, giving them free land. So we have investors who are getting free things from the public, but you can't say that about this gentleman of Mukwano. So you have to respect that he's been able to achieve this. His company is the biggest company in Uganda in terms of brand recognition. And I say that there was about 2 weeks ago, I think there was a ranking of businesses in the world, and one of the brands, I think it was number 40, that was recognized as a brand. So you have global brands in Africa being ranked. Some of them are from outside of Africa, but the ones that are homegrown, Mukwano was the only one from Uganda that was recognized, that could be recognized across the continent. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's amazing that he's been able to do that, given that we hardly see any other person doing it like he did.
Around 1996, a story has been circulating, actually written by Moses Serwanga for the New Vision in 1996. Armal Kamali decided to relocate from Kampala and settle in Fort Portal, where he had his home in Toro. But one of the things he did, he just didn't relocate. He left his children to run the business in Kampala and went and almost started afresh with almost a new business, which was investing in the tea industry. And you're talking about people scrambling. You have had fights over investors being allocated land to do things that they should be doing. He's grown. I think he's the Mukwano Group and the Rwenzori Commodities. If anybody did an audit today, they'll find they're some of the biggest, they own some of the biggest real estate because of the investment in tea. But this was a negotiation with the people who have the land he bought, and you don't see a situation saying, I'm negotiating to take over this former government estate and invest in it. Lydia, you edit business at the Daily Monitor.
Yes.
And the bigger question that people will always keep asking, why is it that whenever everybody wants to, the so-called investors come and they want a package of free things, but there are also people who can show a success story without waiting for those free things?
Certainly, that is true. And when we look at Mukwano's story, it really gives us that example of it's possible without the free things. If only we had more of those, this economy would be doing really, really better than it is doing at the moment. Mukwano's contribution has been big, from agriculture to real estate to manufacturing. I'm sure each of us has something from Mukwano in our homes, be it cooking oil.
If it's not cooking oil, it's the plate on which
there's a plastic somewhere, you know, you just can't run away from it.
Or bucket.
How do we beat that? Who is going to step in that gap? It's such a big opportunity for us Ugandans to look up and learn from what he has been able to do, how he started, how he gave a chance to Ugandans to actually be employed. You know, there are so many companies that come up, but when you look at the quality of jobs that they will give Ugandans, they are the ones that are really at the low end. But Mukwano gave Ugandans a chance. He gave people a chance to work. I think he was gifted in his people relations. When you look at the stories, just the name Mukwano, a friend of many, you know, that is already significant in its own sense. To employ between 7,000 and 14,000 is not a small number in this economy. We need to replicate that. For me, there are many lessons in there in Mukwano's death. Even in his death, we should pick on the mantle and run with it.
What is it that makes people like Mukwano, in your view? From what branch are they cut?
There are some attributes, I would think. There are attributes of teamwork, of selflessness, of dedication. You know, being a leader in its reality.
You know, the thing you learn from hearing the testimonies around Mukwano is that the typical capitalist is very hard. It's very hard for the typical capitalist to make it in a meaningful way. That so we're talking about businesses. So Mukwano is one of the biggest brands in Uganda. he's also the one brand that has not gotten freebies to be where he is. Instead, he's built up people, different people, families. He's brought different families, different people to work for him, and they've stayed even when from the testimonies we've seen, even when people thought they were making mistakes, he allowed them to prosper. And so what does that tell me? That when you have companies which instead focus on squeezing as much as they can the communities from where they're supposed to make money, then those communities, those businesses do not prosper. And we've seen it in the case of businesses coming here. We give them tax incentives, we give them tax waivers, we give them free land, we give them all sorts of things. And at the end of it all, they either go away after 10 years after the incentives have gone away, or if they are staying, but not in a meaningful way. Just the other day, there is a story I was doing around the EAC, products going into the EAC. And one of the products they raised was palm oil. We gave Bidco, for example, as Uganda, we gave them most of the a decent amount of islands in Lake Victoria. They cut down important forests, and still, when East African community inspectors come to inspect us, they find that we are still importing the raw palm oil to be able to produce refined cooking oil. On the other hand, we have Mukwano and other companies who are investing in communities and being able to produce soya and sunflower, and then use it for the production of oil. So what does it say? It says the shortcuts can never work. Because you see the problem with having investors that come in and you help them up versus a Mukwano who works his way up. When Mukwano works his way up, we are getting merits. He's there at the top on merit. When you have someone who comes and gets free land, gets free tax incentives, he's not there with merit. So maybe he would not have been the right person in that place. And that affects, generally, how successful or unsuccessful he becomes.
Is it a surprise, Lydia, to you, sitting and working on all these stories, that you go through year after year and you don't see scandal following a big business in this country? No threat of collapse, expanding tremendously. Even when it has expanded, you don't see a lot of that. And there's another question I'd like to put. The success of people of Indian origin in this industry. Yes, some of them have courted a lot of controversy. Some haven't courted controversy, but they've been largely successful. Because Mukwano, from what we know, his father arrives in this country in 1904 and lays the foundation for business. But when he arrives here, he doesn't arrive here with a bag of money, or doesn't arrive here walking into State House to negotiate deals and say, I am a big investor, I can mobilize money, but give me a startup. They basically start from scratch. And this you'll find the story of Mukwano. Unfortunately, I think for Mukwano, he hasn't written a book. At least I'm not aware that he's left a book. But if you read books like Tide of Fortune, which was written by Muljibai Madhvani, the second, I think, he was the first generation of the Madhvanis, because the second generation would be the guys currently running the Kakira and the Madhvani group, and then they're going into the third generation. He wrote a book, Tide of Fortune, to talk about starting from very, very humble beginnings, building your way up. You then Nanjibai Kalidas Mehta wrote another book, Call of the Peacock, which was I think released sometime last year or the other year, also talking about where they started from. If you look at some of those, all of them from Indian origin, the thing is the size of their dreams versus native Ugandans and how we size up our dreams. If you go to Kachira, for example, there's a hill within the estate called, I think they call it Kawempe, which I think is the highest point within the estate. You stand on that hill and you're able to cast your eyes over a vast estate. with the villages that house the workers, with the factory on one side, and everything they've been able to do. And I keep asking myself the question, how do certain people dream? And how do they move to realize, to actualize those dreams? And especially people of Indian origin versus local Ugandans. What stands in the way?
Well, I think the Indians are gifted in family businesses compared to us. When you look at many big empires started by Indians, they have that ability to plan their succession. They find a way of including their children in businesses, something which our indigenous business people here are struggling to do. You find a big company, but their children are not involved. Now, how do you build on how do you make sure your legacy lives on long after you've gone if the people closest to you are not part of the business? What we are seeing instead is after a year or less, big business people like that.
What we thought were big business people,
what we thought were big businesses are no more. Look at the story of Zimwe. You know, Zimwe was a big household name while he was here with us. Right now, it's a pain to see that Zimwe is nowhere. There are many of those. I wouldn't be able to list all of them, but it certainly teaches us that we need to do something about our succession.
Some people have been asking the question, which is a separate question I wanted to put, or a discussion I wanted to raise. The immediate successor to the Mukwano Empire is a lady, yes. Rukshana Kamali.
Yes.
Recently there was a bit of controversy because former Prime Minister Apollo Robin Nsibambi chose a girl for an heir. The Mulwana group of companies was taken over by a daughter. Barbara. Barbara Mulwana. And I was thinking through it and saying, is it the era of women CEOs? Are these men who are actually successful in their own right seeing something the vast majority of Ugandans or of people all over the world fail to see?
In my view, I think it's a good trend. It's a good step of confidence in women, considering that...
Is it accidental, you think?
No, I don't think it's accidental. I really think it's deliberate because those ladies have shown that they are able to carry on
or their parents,
the
their fathers
legacy.
have seen that they have more potential in
As
them.
a parent, you watch your children, you know them, you know what each of them is capable of. Not to say that the boys or the men in the family were not capable. No, I don't want to be quick to judge that. But if there is a character, if there is a virtue, if there is a trait you've seen and you know that this daughter of mine can carry on, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a step of confidence, and in this day and age where we are trying to give our children the very best, this should be a testimony to that. Much as we are in a patriarchal society where, you know, there is a lot of talk over no, if the girl takes over the business, then it will be gone. I don't think that's right. I think we should give ladies a chance.
And Nsibambi's clan claimed that it was against
Nsibambi's clan.
the clan regulations.
I really feel terrible about that. But if Nsibambi had girls for children, was he to remove? Was he to hand over his what he had left to somebody else and not a biological child?
Victor, let me come back to that other question I had put to Lydia as well, to you. Because we keep wondering what builds success. How is success built? What stock are people like Mukwano, people like Muljibai Madvani, people like Khalida Smeta? What? Yes, maybe you might say people like Mulwana. What are they cut from? What makes entrepreneurship?
You know, this is I think, a complicated question that, since I'm not an entrepreneur, it might be hard for me to answer, but here's what I observe. One of the things that one of my lecturers in university told us was that if you look at Ugandan people of Ugandan origin, businessmen, they only last a certain period. As long as a certain government is in power, they are rich. The government goes, they are no longer rich. And we can see this. There is a gentleman, for example, who used to be in, who came up through the ranks because he was involved in the leather industry. Then he went into the business of selling markets fraudulently, I might add, went into all sorts of businesses, but where it involved getting free money from government. And this is at a time when leather is one of the things that has been highlighted as that it will most likely be the biggest product to be sold at through the African Continental Trade Area. So he abandoned a business which had potential to grow across the continent for a business that is sketchy and can only last as long as there is a government that favors him in power. So we have that problem. I think the second one is...
Well, that I would say is not unique to Uganda. It happens in India, happens in Pakistan, happens in the United States of America, happens all over the world. That certain businesses, there is a whole investigation now going on about businesses that thrived in Germany because of the period of Hitler, the Nazis, and around the Holocaust. There are those businesses that the regime favored and allowed to continue operating, and those that it didn't favor. So you didn't give that a universal application, would you?
But you see, Charles, the problem here is that this guy was actually, you could say, successful. He could have kept
I can guess,
building.
I know you're trying to avoid the name, but if you trace back the success of the leather business, didn't belong to that gentleman. It was the father's business.
Yeah, but that's
so he inherited a business from the father.
Yes, and that's the point I'm trying to make, that he inherited a viable business from the father and kept growing it, but the moment he got close to power, then he abandoned it for other things. And the Indians we are talking about will then keep building until they become the biggest business in Uganda or wherever else. And the other thing, in my view, is the tendency for rich Africans to marry very many women. That creates, I don't know how to put it, but that creates divisions, and therefore, the moment you're dead, children, the wives and children, they start scrambling for your wealth because they were not close to you. I'm not sure they are even interested in upholding your name. You were just a source of school fees or money or whatever. So they are scrambling to tear your legacy apart because of that. So I think
they don't share in it.
Yes. So I would say that those are some of the factors. I'm not sure those are comprehensive enough, but I think those are some of the factors that lead to what we see, where we have these other people growing and another set of businesses dying the moment the owner who was holding it together dies.
If you read Tide of Fortune, for example, and read Call of the Peacock, even in these businesses, a time comes when they might have disagreements, but they are able to hold together at some level. In Tide of Fortune, Madvani talks about when things got complicated. And they had to sit down because the business was growing bigger and decide to divide the many businesses amongst themselves. So every member of the family takes a part of the business, which from what I'm hearing, Mukwano might have done when he decided to relocate and live in Fort Portal. He decided to leave some aspects of the business to different members of the family, everybody taking their own share, but building into the same and continuing to build the brand together, which the Madvanis have done very successfully. I think Mukwano did successfully. Even the Metas at some stage also had disagreements. And once they had the disagreements, they had to sit down and decide who takes charge of what business. Who sit down around the family table, hold a discussion, which is actually a business meeting, and say, we're having these disagreements. They're not healthy for us. They're not healthy for the business. We must protect the name of the family and the name of the businesses. But you this is your portion, run it. You, this is your portion, run it. You, this is your portion, run it. As you continue to pull back together. And they seem to be able to do that successfully. Like you said, you raised that example, and it hadn't clicked in my mind that actually people have opportunities to build onto businesses that can actually grow and make them. But we're deal makers. Many Ugandans are deal makers. You run for the next quicker deal.
Yeah.
And I've also seen the other thing is, if you look at these people who have invested in real estate, in plantation agriculture especially, so sugar cane, tea and other things, they're Ugandans who at one stage own as much as 10 square miles of land. One individual, one family. And it's a bush. You have a few cows in one corner and you say I have a kraal there, and then a few other cows in another corner, then another cow. But you're not a successful dairy or beef farmer with a name worth talking about. And you're asking, why are you accumulating all this land? The question I was asking, if a young Madivani could walk up that hill and dream and say, I want to extend my reach to the horizon on all sides around the River Nile there, and actually actualize that. Or if you walk into one of the Mukwano tea estates in Toro and see how far it spreads, and say, how big was this guy dreaming? And then you compare with a guy who's fighting up and grabbing every piece of land available, wherever they can find it, and they never put it to any big, meaningful use. They trade it to the next buyer, burn the money. If they decide to run and build malls, like has become malls, apartments that has become the norm around town here, everybody runs and puts some things together and then move on. And you're asking yourself, why aren't we stepping back to think or learn lessons?
Yeah, but like I said, it's important for these things to fall in the right hands. If you're grabbing land because you're connected, you don't know how to use it. You don't have a dream of what you want to do with that land. And that's our problem. Our resources are not allocated the way they should be. They are allocated to the wrong people, maybe I should say. And that's, I guess, a problem.
We'll need to take a quick commercial break. When we come out of the break, we'll be talking about the issues that have gotten Ugandans talking. Two stories have gotten Ugandans talking. One is the arrest of Jospeh Kabuleta, apparently, under the Computer Misuse Act, and the growing list of people who have been arrested for annoying the person of the president or annoying Museveni. And then we'll also discuss these bubbling tribal issues, and we'll end with President Yoweri Museveni and his geopolitical profile after a short commercial break. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and may the soul of Armali Kamali Mukwano rest in eternal peace. He was laid to rest on Saturday. There's a story that's been circulating. It was written by Moses Serwanga in 1996. He making a wish that he wanted to be buried in Fort Portal, but he ended up being buried in Kololo. And so people were sharing it and saying, the man had relocated and wanted, people want that attachment to feel like he had made a wish that hasn't been respected. But as journalism practitioners, the space for free speech, protections under Article 29 of the Uganda Constitution, and I think Article 43 of the Uganda Constitution on freedom of expression, does the arrest of Jospeh Kabuleta, or did the passage of the Computer Misuse Act take away the freedoms provided by Article 29 of the Constitution? Kabuleta has been arrested because of his posts, particularly, and the police say they have been following what he has been doing for some time. Well, there are two issues about Kabuleta's arrest. One is the man of arrest and what that means, which is not formal arrest nor summons, but a kind of almost a kidnap, from what we have heard. He's seated out chilling somewhere, call him out, and then put him in a can, whisk him off. what does that mean for security? But number two is, yes, the advent of social media, because he publishes what he calls his Kabuleta's rant, and also posts on Facebook. One, the risk that the Computer Misuse Act was designed to prevent misuse of a platform that's available to everybody. But how much does it take away from the rights provided for under Article 29 of the Constitution? Let me start with you, Dictor. You might agree or disagree with Kabuleta's views, but
you listed the people that have been arrested, but I think there are two or three ladies that you've forgotten.
There's been Shaka Mayanja. No, not Shaka Mayanja. Shaka, Robert Shaka. He was arrested because they suspected he was TVO. The government of Uganda, the Uganda Communications Commission, and government generally invested a lot of taxpayers' resources to try and unearth who TVO is. TVO is a character, is a name on Facebook. They have invested a lot of resources, made a lot of phone calls, and lost a case to Facebook Ireland, which is also in charge of Africa, over the identity of TVO. But many people have been picked up and arrested for their social media posts. So Stella Nyanzi is in jail. I think if she's being charged under Section 23 of the Computer Misuse Act, the sentence is either 24,000 currency points or a jail sentence of 1 year.
Yeah.
She's been in jail for more than a year already, meaning she has almost served the duration of her sentence, but there are other charges coming over her. There was this musician, Bajo,
yes,
recently. There were those ladies.
Yeah,
there was some.
The one who wanted to hit the president with her genitals or something,
Yes.
and then I think there was someone else as well.
Yes.
The issue really is that at first when Stella Nyanzi refused bail so that she could, and she insisted that her case is tried, most of us thought her irrational, but it turned out that she's actually an activist worth her name, because what has been happening is that the government, you have laws included in, we have on our law books that are then struck down by the Supreme Court. And then the government comes up with fresh laws to do exactly the same thing. We've seen it with the Public Order Management Act. We've seen it. We are seeing
Public
it now.
Order Management Act responding to the striking out of Section 32(2) of the Police Act.
Yes, and then we are seeing it now with the laws, the one that the Andrew Mwenda, I think Andrew Mwenda Charles Onyango versus the state. So
I think that was used to be Section 50 of the Penal Code Act, the old Section 50 of
so,
the Penal Code Act.
so,
I think
so,
publication
so
of false news or something like that.
Yeah, so we see this a lot, and Stella Nyanzi is heroic in the sense that she decided, I can get bail, but I will not get it. I'll force these guys to try me on these charges. Because now whatever happens, they have to try her. If they sentence her, then this thing will keep going and can reach the African court or wherever, but it will keep going until it's decided on whether it stays in our law books or not. And I think in that sense, she's doing a service for the Kabuletas, for each one of us. And that because now the government has to know that this law that they are using to stop Ugandans from speaking up, they are saying what they want to say, its days must be numbered because of how they've used it. And I think that's a good thing. That's something we have to applaud her for.
But for Kabuleta, did you read the post that we haven't seen a charge sheet for him yet?
Yeah.
So we do not know exactly what the police first and the prosecution abroad will lay out as the charges against him. But the statement from Fred Enanga gives an inkling on what the thinking is, what the holding charge is.
Well, apparently they say that he abused the office of the president through the words that he said. But when you look at this
we have his a bit of his rant, I think, on the screen. Just go ahead, Lydia.
I want to take us to that specific bit of the Computer Misuse Act, which reads, that is Section 25 of the Computer Misuse Act, which reads on offensive communication and cyber harassment. It says any person who willfully and repeatedly uses electronic communication to disturb or attempts to disturb the peace, quiet, or right of privacy of any person with the purpose, with no purpose of legitimate communication, whether or not a conversation ensues, commits a misdemeanor and is liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 24 currency points or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year or both. That's what it says. Are we seeing this provision of the law coming to sidestep the Constitution, what the Constitution says, that we have a right to freedom, as to what amounts to inciting the person of the president? It doesn't seem to come out clearly. But every now and then somebody uses a social media platform. Now we have actually been duly warned that whatever we post there will be held liable for it.
The question is, should it have been in the first place a criminal offense? Because it's possible that these insults, annoyance of whichever person, could be pursued privately under civil litigation,
Yeah.
not criminal. Should somebody be held criminally liable for making someone else uncomfortable?
Oh, well, the
should it be a criminal offense?
The issue for me is maybe there are instances where it should be, because social media can be a platform for someone to stalk you and maybe cause your death at some point, because they can incite other people to kill you, to kidnap you, to whatever. So social media it has some dangers that the world over have been recognized. The problem here, I don't think the problem is freedom of speech. I think the problem we have here is someone using the laws we have to abuse, someone abusing our laws to use them for other purposes other than what they were meant to be. And for me, I think the problem isn't the law per se. The law can be used for good. The problem is it's now being used to target people who are legitimately criticizing the government. Because you can say all you want to say. I mean, with Stella, it was because she was vulgar, and again she argues this is something that has been done before, including by people fighting for independence in Uganda. And for Kabuleta, it has been said that, I mean, everyone knows that insulting the president's family can be problematic. And so all that is, but the point is, should they have a skin that thin? Is it really stalking in the sense? Is it stalking in the sense that it can be dangerous? Are these people using it in a dangerous way? I think those are the questions that the police and the law should really answer. And I think we can't say that's what's happening.
How much criticism can the person of the president take? How much criticism? Because even for the family, in Kabuleta's rant, he makes an attack on General Muhoozi Kainerugaba directly. He, and of course the president and the first lady in some of his rants, and this particular one, what he calls, I think, the mafia regime and the transition. He called it mafia regime. Kabuleta's rant returns, mafia regime and the transition. All these three individuals are public figures, and by their own volition. General Muhoozi being in the military, and now as a special...
He's a presidential advisor, making him a politician, so to speak.
Yes, within the political realm.
Yeah.
The first lady is within the political realm, and the president is the president of the country. How safely can they... where do you draw the lines for their private lives and their public space? And if criticism... when does criticism cross over the line to become criminally sanctioned.
And but you see, what we've seen, for example, just the other day in the U.S., Trump was told he cannot block people who insult him because he uses his Twitter account as a public. It's a public space. He's a public official. So if we use that same logic,
he insults quite a lot of people. On
yes, but the fact that the courts in the U.S. were like, no, you cannot block anyone, whatever they tell you, because yours is a public account. It's for public consumption. So if you use that same logic, then our president, his son, and his wife should be able to accept that this is the life we chose, therefore we should live with it. And I mean, no one can even argue that Kabuleta or Stella Nyanzi could have harmed the president, physically harmed the president. So it's just wrong that we are using resources at a time when we have so many, we have backlog in the courts, we have security a security system that isn't working, and we are using these resources to protect public officials from something that's verbal, from criticism, instead of trying to do the things that we need to do, which is ensure security, ensure that our people are not spending forever in jail for cases they might not have committed.
My concern is why should he be arrested in that way, like he's being kidnapped or something? Is that something the law really permits, or it's out of order?
Yeah, but we are a lawless country, so to speak. So
yeah, I think the danger that I've seen people rise about the manner of arrest is if you keep doing it that way to execute official mission, what happens when criminal-minded people study the pattern and begin kidnapping people? Yes, and it's not the first time it has happened. It has happened before. It's a debate. I think I saw something I witnessed covering the 2007 riots in just before Walk to Work, the protests in Kampala, the introduction. No, 2007, the introduction of the Kiboko Squad.
Oh yeah.
And some people said, why would we allow people holding sticks to chase us around town? It was an old man. I think I met somewhere around that roundabout of Grand Imperial. I think after running around town and getting tired, an old man said, why should we allow people to chase us around town just holding sticks, young men, to menace us like this? And people I think people are beginning to think, can't we move back and mobilize and attack these people? An incident like that almost happened in March, India. A gang of young people picked their own sticks and said, we shall confront whoever is doing this to us. And if you have sanctioned that as a way of doing business, official business, you will not draw the line on who is doing it officially and who is doing it unofficially. So if the manner of Kabuleta has a known address, I think he hangs around, he works with Elvis Mbonye. He can be tracked. He could have been summoned.
He could have been summoned.
Yeah, he could have been summoned to respond. They could have walked into a place they know and introduced themselves and arrest him formally. Why choose a form of arrest that criminals can actually take advantage of?
No, because you see, Charles, this thing has happened before. We had the case of Chitata, we had Nixon Agasire. All these guys came up in that form, semi-criminal activity on behalf of the state, and then it became official criminal activity in the name of the state. And this happens and over again. A new regime comes in the security circles. They bring a fresh set of criminal-minded people to do crime, and it keeps happening over and over again. Then they arrest, then they start afresh, and it's happening over and over again, and probably explains why partly explains why we keep seeing an increase in crime, because we have a state that has no problem hobnobbing with criminals, and that's the problem, because you just remember a video, pictures of a man that was beaten and pushed into a taxi
near Christ the King.
Near Christ the King at a time when people were actually being kidnapped. So it's something that has been, or the Pine car bond, same thing. You have the state working with people to do criminal activity that then causes consequences generally. And I just don't understand why, because Kabuleta can be found surely. If someone who has been around as long as Kabuleta has, it's not possible that this, even if, let's say, they didn't want to summon him, they can go through the process, get a court order, go to his house, have him arrested. Why do they need to do that? But my guess would be, it was a Friday, they felt like punishing him. They expect that most likely when Monday comes,
people will be following up and trying to secure him.
And he would
no,
get
but you
bail.
remember Gertrude Tumusime Witware, who worked here?
Yeah.
She was kidnapped as she was walking down. And it turned out the people who kidnapped her were also angry about a Facebook post she had made and were linked to the state. Though the former IGP jumped onto the scene and then followed up towards her alleged rescue and they let her be later, what that causes is she's no longer in the media. And I want to believe that that single experience was enough to push her to the limit and say, I can't take this anymore. But there are other people who have also been picked up like this. The two questions I'd like to put to you ladies. Number one is, if you were General Muhoozi, wouldn't you be justifiably angered by what Kabuleta posted?
Well, there was a degree of what I would call angering somebody when you read the post that Kabuleta put on his Facebook post. But it also raises the issue of whether journalists or people with the pen, people who wield the power to say something, shouldn't be what I would call shouldn't be critical of this government. On how critical do you get?
Charles,
Is it an offense to be critical to the person of the
It
president?
can be criminalized. You can find, Enanga found some sections of the law.
So here's the thing, that the difference between us and, I'm sorry to say, and animals is that human beings have self-control. None of us here, no one can claim that they have never been insulted. You don't have to do something about being insulted. I'm a woman. Like, it's normal for me to be walking on the street, someone says something, I ignore them, they throw an insult. Imagine if I had to stop to fight or quarrel over all of those insults. It would be, I'd seem like a mad person. If you have power, okay, so let me put it this way. If maybe I have some bit of power, even over that person who insults me, I can go to the police. Maybe I have some bit of fame that I can use to harass that person into... The point is, if you have power, use it wisely. Yeah, someone has insulted you. Go shrug it off, talk to someone, get someone, a counselor, whatever. You do not need to use...
Do a Trump. Do a Trump and fire off a rant on Twitter.
Yeah, you do not need to use our police forces, our courts, to then take this, to show that you're powerful, because that, I'm sorry to say, suggests you're weak. Because you're not using your power the right way. You're using it for petty purposes. People will insult you, yes.
You're using it the raw way.
Yeah.
You're using raw power.
Yes, and so I agree, it was, the article was insulting, but the adult would have, if acting like an adult would mean, you ignore the man, or you respond if you want, in a civilized way, or you have a discussion with him, whatever, and then we don't have to be doing this.
Okay, for context purposes, we kept referring to President Trump. President Trump leaked emails, diplomatic mails, emails from the United Kingdom ambassador to Washington, revealed that he had called the, which actually almost similar words like Kabuleta uses. he called the regime in Washington inept, incompetent, and some other things. But that's what was picked out. And President Trump was extremely pissed by what he was briefed on. And he fired off and said, this guy, we don't actually like him that much. He's not much of a friend. I've never met him. I don't know him. But and also insulted him back.
Yeah, he insulted him back, included May, her failure to deal with Brexit,
yes,
and so on and so forth. The point is, and you can't...
And then, interestingly for President Trump, a few days later, he was given a fuller version of the leaked emails and said, but he actually also said some nice things about me. He just didn't insult me through and through.
So, yeah, and that's what it means to be... to deal in a place where you can be that people will talk about you, because if people will talk about you, they'll say both bad and good things. And you can't fight every time they say bad things. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay. But is the thing, ladies, that what started out as small, nibbling away at freedoms that, one, shouldn't be granted by the state, should be inherent, but the ones that initially focused on mainstream media practitioners keep edging into general freedoms of communication, freedoms of speech, freedoms of expression, and eating away. You do not know the Computer Misuse Act, the way it is at the moment, appears to be growing like a hydra. Passed quietly, and now it's beginning to suck up and eat up different people. You cannot tell who it will eat up next. We need to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about that incident at Quality Shopping Mall in Nigeria. No, beyond Nigeria, it's Kira. Towards Kira? Nalia. And we'll also be talking, yes, and especially the sentiment of tribe that it has kicked off, but also be talking about President Yoweri Museveni and his regional work, holding meetings in Angola and recently in Tanzania. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This last segment of the Fourth Estate, coming to you live from Serena Conference Center. Watching us from Fort Portal, I believe the Honorable Stephen Basaliza says, the people of Toro have missed a great friend, investor, kind and generous Muzee, who loved Toro as his mother place and reason he had wished to be buried in Fort Portal. Though it did not happen, and Batoro waited anxiously to give him a deserving send-off. The people of Toro will forever remember him for the love he had, plus his contribution to employment, sports, health, and others. Gad Bender is also watching us, and Gad Bender says, a leader must have a thick skin to withstand criticism and deal with it with a level of decency. If you are criticized as a leader, you should be able to deal with that. Let me read his actual words. It says, yeah, thanks, Charles and colleagues. A strong leader is that one who can have a high degree of tolerance and has a strong skin to absorb criticism with decency. Gad Bender. Other messages are coming through on some of the issues we're discussing in the first two sections of the discussion. Ladies, President Yoweri Museveni has been, some people would use the word gallivanting across the region or hosting delegations. Hosted a delegation of the new leadership of Sudan, which is still in trouble, trying to, just before they reached an agreement with the protesters, who now almost formed the opposition because the military eased itself into the leadership position after the overthrow of Bashir. And then, so General Burhan came to Uganda and found the president in Mbale, where they had a discussion. Then there was that conference in Angola, which had President Museveni, President Tshisekedi of the DR Congo, President Paul Kagame, and President Joa of Angola as the host. and from there to Tanzania. What is Museveni looking for? What are people looking for from him?
I guess for Sudan.
This is the Angola summit.
I'm guessing for Sudan, the African Union was starting to make noises. So I would say the leaders in Sudan were trying to get some African leaders on their side because, as you know, from, let's say, the case of Burundi, when the African Union Commission tried to deploy a peacekeeping force, it's the presidents that defeated it in the end. So Sudan, they were trying to get some backing because while they have backing from the Middle East, Sudan has backing from the Middle East. If the UN got involved and the African Union got involved, leaders in Africa would then play a role. And I guess President Museveni is one of those leaders that you can say is easy to mellow, to get on your side. Yeah, so I would say that's what Sudan was about.
Can he maintain being positioning himself as some sort of kingmaker, trying to get everybody, mellow to everybody in the region?
He's okay.
I think he's also trying to sort out the issues within the smaller ESC as he angles for the bigger African free trade area. When you look at that bigger union,
is he a key player in the discussions of an African free trade area?
No, I think as President Museveni has grown older, he has mellowed a bit. I think his calculations are now simple. In the case of Angola, the one thing that I see these four countries have in common is DRC. And the fact that some time back these countries were in DRC fighting on different sides, on the side of Mobutu, I believe, and Uganda and Rwanda fighting too. I think it was about DRC. So, but on the ESC, as far as I can tell, I don't think Kagame and Museveni, I don't think they have made enough inroads to say they will sort out the issues of the ESC. So I think it has to do with DRC. The summit in Angola had to do with DRC.
What is Angola calculating? Because Angola is a central player in the politics of Kinshasa. A very large section of ethnic Congolese, they share a common border, but also they share the ethnic communities at their common border is very, very significant. Like Eastern DRC does trade with Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda. The other part of the DRC does a lot of its business with Angola. It's the closest neighbor. So Angola has legitimate and serious interest in the DRC with the new leadership there. And like Victor says, in the late 1990s, I think about 1998, 1999, when Uganda and Rwanda were on the side of Kabila Senior. As Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, I think, and many of those southern African countries, about almost 7 of them, were on the other side, protecting the Kinshasa government. So they were clashing. Now all that has turned around, and Angola has been hosting these conferences to try and one, assert its position as a central player in the DR Congo politics, but also try to get the buy-in of these other countries that are affected. If you remember that during the regime of President Jospeh Kabuleta, lots of meetings were held in Ngurdoto in Tanzania, in Arusha, and in other places to try and resolve largely ungoverned areas of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo for festering a rebellion against both Uganda and Rwanda, or providing safe haven in those areas. And I think Uganda and Rwanda wanting to have free reign to walk in and out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But there are issues that are still unresolved. Can those be resolved now? Does President Museveni remain a central player in that?
Yes.
How much influence does he have?
No, because you see, he doesn't have to have a lot of influence. He just has to be the president of Uganda, which happens to be DRC's neighbor, which means if he wants, he can stabilize DRC. And I guess that's what the Angolan president is trying to deal with. And also Angola, for most of the independence period, they've been quiet because they had their own problems to deal with. I think they are finally stabilizing, and maybe the new president of Angola is energetic enough and wants to be a significant player in the whole African integration agenda. And I mean, who better to start with than if you can solve a problem with DRC, then you have a legitimate, because DRC has been a problematic country for a very long time. If you can solve a problem with DRC, then you have a legitimate claim at being an influential leader on the African continent. I think that would be what he's playing at.
And what's the calculation with Tanzania? Magufuli and Museveni?
Well, Tanzania, there are so many things going on with Tanzania and Uganda, going on in the EAC, so to speak. And it's trade, although, and unfortunately, that's one of the things that I've been noticing. The president goes out of the country, you cannot say that we get so much out of it. But there are opportunities for trade, there are opportunities if Magufuli is interested in the functioning of the EAC, there are opportunities to try and resolve the Rwanda-Uganda problem. There are opportunities in Tanzania that those visits can resolve.
Lydia, just a few years ago you had President Yoweri Museveni, President Paul Kagame, and President Uhuru Kenyatta signing up to something they called the Coalition of the Willing to push ahead with the political integration of the East African community, and saying if Tanzania is reluctant,
we'll proceed.
Yes, we'll proceed and move ahead. Then you have Kenya and Uganda discussing the oil pipeline going through the port of Lamu in Kenya. And then that collapses because apparently Magufuli walks into Kampala and turns on a charm offensive and swings President Yoweri Museveni. Of course, that is largely political, not deep analysis. The deeper part of the analysis is that the companies that are investing in the oil business, especially Total and the others, did a feasibility study and tried to convince the government of Uganda that a Tanzania route is cheaper and more viable than a Kenya route. The Kenya route would be complicated. But it comes, and the interpretation across the border in Nairobi is, you've snubbed us. You made us plan, we believed that this thing was coming to us, now it's not coming. You had planned the standard gauge railway. It might be having its issues in Kenya and may not have started taking off in Uganda, but then Rwanda and Tanzania were discussing their own version of the standard gauge railway. And the things they're disagreeing on includes what kind of truck to build, who to build it, who to fund it. Now Kenya seems to be a bit stuck with its SGR, where it is. Uganda, of course, can't start without Kenya making some progress. Rwanda and Tanzania. This relationship that is like ping pong.
Yes.
You know, Uhuru was in Tanzania and he was given peacocks. Yes, President Magufuli gave him peacocks. Yes.
Well, I think they are beginning to realize that they cannot. I think it's beginning to realize that he cannot entirely do away with Tanzania, going by that decision of the oil pipeline, which you pointed out. But Tanzania also has some special historical ties for President Museveni, where he began the FRONASA, which eventually turned into the NRM or NRA. And, you know, there is a bit of some history background to it. But also, the options that have availed themselves have shown that Tanzania is offering a better deal. And I think these presidents are also in the business of looking for the best deal and what will benefit their home country in the end. So I think he's trying to position himself in a way that will be endearing to Tanzania, to also loosen up a bit. You mentioned of the Coalition of the Willing some years back. But history also shows us that Tanzanians don't just get by with whatever you propose. They don't just hop
They're
on board.
not excitable people.
Yeah, they're not easily excitable people. But as a leader, as a kingmaker, you want to be, you want to have people's interests at heart. And I think that's just what he's trying to do as he prepares for the elections coming and many other roles of that nature.
On the coalition of the willing, I think that's gone. The other day, President Museveni was suggesting that if Tanzania builds the SGR to reach Uganda faster than Kenya does, we shall take
the Tanzania option.
We shall take the Tanzania option. So
The best deal.
and for me, I've always said I find that we as a country, we fail to our foreign affairs, all these deals we are supposed to be making. We don't think long term. We don't sit and decide and say our feasibility study shows this and this will happen, so we shall go with, let's say we shall go with the Mombasa route because Mombasa is good for us in this way or that way. It feels like everything happens on a whim, and for me that's a problem, because
we're not investing in economic intelligence.
Yeah,
to know the thinking of the long-term thinking of the regime, the government in Dodoma. We're not investing in economic intelligence to know what the thinking in Nairobi is,
we don't even
is, so that you can project.
We don't even try and say our best interest lies here. All we have is the president going, making promises, and after that we start throwing money at projects. It doesn't matter whether they'll come through or not. And for me, I think that's a problem. I just wish that the president would sit with his people, decide, so this is what I want Uganda to do. And on social media, people always complain about the way journalists talk about Rwanda, but that's the one thing you can respect Kagame for. He says, I want this, and when he say, when they announce things, it feels like they've sat down, they've thought about it, they've done some feasibility studies, they've decided this works, this might not work. You feel like the cost-benefit analysis has been done, something that Uganda has failed to do. And for me, it kind of explains why we have a president who for a long time was a kingmaker, and as a country we have nothing to show for it. Because like I said, now he has mellowed. There are younger people who are coming in, and even those who are not so young like Kagame have sort of taken the show, because Rwanda is able to get aid, which we almost no longer get. We have to fund our budget through our taxes and borrowing. And so there are people who have learned that this is a system you can work for the good of your people. I think as a country we missed that opportunity, but even the little that we have and we could be able to use, we are not using it. For example, at the beginning of the year, Amelia Chambade and Tanzania's Minister of Trade signed a deal where they were supposed to allow sugar go into Tanzania. It's not being sold. People still have stocks of sugar, and the effect has been the prices of sugarcane have gone down. So the manufacturers are affected. Our population is affected. Outgrowers are affected, and in the long run, our industries could start going to Kenya, because if outgrowers are selling their sugarcane to Kenya, Kakira and the others will be affected, and then the factories themselves, which are already over capacity, will be. So I feel like I wish the president, all this so-called king making could amount to something. For now, it's not.
Yeah, because you'll ask, you intervene in the Democratic Republic of Congo from as early as 1996. One is, no one has ever counted for the number of Ugandans, especially the soldiers, who died in the Democratic Republic of Congo fighting for that country. Yes, we had the women who came back and the children, but the long-term thinking. What deals did you sign with DRC after that gives you any benefits, any tangible, official benefits from your intervention to account for the blood of Ugandans that were lost in that country? Nothing. people have talked about it. When countries like Kenya have visa-free entry into South Africa, Ugandans have to struggle through with visas. Yet you hosted units of Umkhonto Wesizwe, the ANC fighting group, and trained them here, and you have a memorial for them. You have Rwanda. Rwandans who are in Uganda, especially those serving in the army, walk out of this country and go back home. You support them, you protect them, but at the end of the day, you can't say, this is what at an official level we negotiated, and say, because of this intervention, this is what we're able to get out of it. South Sudan, same story. The established companies that are able to make a breakthrough in South Sudan as business people at a negotiation at governmental level are largely Kenyan and other players, international players, into South Sudan when you have played an outsized role in trying to stabilize that country. Somalia, same story. And you can't keep leveraging petty trade. So you send the Export Promotion Board to begin tracking numbers of informal trade across your borderline with the DR Congo, with South Sudan, and celebrate those numbers as a sign of the success of your intervention in these countries, when you can't say, because of this intervention, we're able to send in these Ugandan companies, these Ugandan businesses, to be able to do business or to soft landing for them. It's still people negotiating. Yes?
Because you see, the problem with depending on informal trade is that as countries stabilize, that's the first thing they want their people to get into.
Yes.
So that means you're the first people that, because even us here, we are looking for investors. So if you enter as an investor at a higher level, you have higher protection than an informal trader who is probably uneducated, who can't afford a lawyer, but also because they need little capital, that's the businesses that locals want. And it's very sad that we have a president who for all intents and purposes, is a tourist, because he goes, he says, I've gone, we've had bilateral talks, and that's the end of it. It's very, very sad, I think.
So you can't put much to this Angola trip, really.
Not much.
If history speaks
history
for
doesn't,
it,
yes, history doesn't bear you out.
Yeah, it
on
says
this.
nothing will come out of that.
And it doesn't matter how many trips you make to Dar es Salaam or to Nairobi.
No, it doesn't.
If you're not carrying a list of to-do things you must achieve on a particular trip,
yeah.
You go have a light chat, have a cup of coffee and walk back.
Yeah.
And smile for the camera.
And smile, yeah, have pictures, social media came, now we can publish all that, and that's the end of that story.
Ladies, let's end with a discussion that is as controversial as they come. Two fatal incidents bring up a discussion that's been bubbling quietly with many Ugandans for a long time. The question of tribe, the incident at Quality shopping mall in Nalia the other day that cost the life of a young businessman, Arnold Inebiona Mojisha. And the discussion that follows that is the discussion of an incident 2 years ago, which resulted also in the death of another young man, Akena. You've been following this discussion. What is it saying that has been unsaid?
This discussion actually says a lot. We join the family that has lost in grieving, and it's very unfortunate, it's very sad, but it's very telling about the state of affairs. The state of affairs in our homes, the state of affairs in our lives, the state of affairs in the way we are actually living. What exactly am I talking about? We seem to have forgotten the basics in terms of how we react to situations, how we control our anger, how we respond generally to issues around us. But there are also other deeper issues to do with the growing inequality that we've written about in economics, and a host of features that have probably remained on paper if at all they were read. It's just so many things that we actually need to start paying attention to. And if we don't, then the future generations...
Somebody in production graphics, please help me correct that. It's not the racial divide. It's a tribe or ethnic divide, something different. Go ahead.
It raises many issues, and if we don't deal with it, if we don't deal with innate issues like this, if we see them happen and just close our eyes...
How would they be dealt with? Because, yes,
we need to talk about these things. We need to get people involved. We need to educate people on how to respond.
Yes. When a grieving father takes to the podium in church to eulogize his son and tells mourners, my son was killed because he belonged to this tribe, and then tries a very, very quick disclaimer and says, you know, this boy didn't even know that this was his tribe because he never even spoke the language. What is that saying to you?
I'd want to start from the fact that the people who passed the 1995 Constitution included a law on anti-sectarianism because of our history. We had been a country that voted based on religion, based on tribe, killed people based, all that. And that has been a problem for a long time. The problem is when that law was passed, I guess it was a time when you could not anticipate technology, and one who could not anticipate technology, but I think even the political willingness to deal with these sentiments hasn't gone the way it should have gone. The government hasn't actively invested in making us a nation. We are supposed to have...
Have we as people invested in making ourselves a nation?
I would say, I'd
but
say
we
yes.
can only go so far.
I'd say yes, because if you want to talk about intermarriages, for example, in this country, people get married across all sorts of north, south, whatever. Like, I am sure you know that many couples are, especially the ones who come to Kampala at one point or another, are married to different, and even in around our houses, it doesn't really matter. We don't really separate ourselves. But the problem is, when you have social media, for example, and you're talking about these two incidents, but I think I realized it was a problem during the Cup of Nations debate. And people were asking, why is a certain tribe not playing football? And others were saying specialization people, some people do this, some people do that. And so you see that underground, this debate is happening. And if we allow it to just stay underground, it will be as dangerous as it can possibly be, because people are, social media is designed in such a way that you keep seeing the things that you want to hear.
People are forming
you reinforce your opinion, it becomes stronger, and because you're hearing that loop from your friends and family, maybe things get worse. Things get worse, and that's something that I think as the government, even as the media, we have to think about and try and moderate this, pick this debate from underground where it is now to a level where we can talk about it, and talk about it in the best way possible, so that we can address these sentiments before they fester and then swallow us.
Lydia, do you think we have the stomach to bring this this debate? Because if you see what was happening on social media, it was sad to some extent, but also significantly revealing on how Ugandans exactly feel about each other. If you trace back 2009, the Buganda riots over the Katichiro's planned visit to Kayunga, that failed trip, and what happened with people being told Tambula Ngomugana and people actually attempting walks that didn't exist. Then you move on progressively and you see, yes, the death of Akena, who shot him, and how that whole spanned out. I remember hosting Odonga Oto in this studio, and hosting Ananti Tukanyamunyu, in the studio, and the kind of debate and what direction it was going, and people mobilizing, and trying to push the hand of the state to take action. Then there's this incident involving this young man, Arnold, the other day. You trace also incidents like, I think it was Norbert Mao, people who started talking about creating the Nile Republic, because they're saying, you have abandoned the rest of us. You no longer belong. We don't feel like we belong to the unified country called Uganda.
Yes.
And you can draw lines across this country and put every group in a particular area. And then internally they can also begin trying to separate or divide themselves. If you trace back a few years ago, I think it was our colleague Angelo who designed a T-shirt called 31 million Bafuruchi. I'm just one of them. The Bafuruchi debate around the Bunyoro sub-region. These are real things.
Yes.
Politics is mobilized around these tribal, ethnic interests. But we've been trying to commit ourselves from the 10-point program to a lot of the rhetoric that comes out of the state to fight against sectarianism, to fight against nepotism, to fight against tribe. When unfortunate incidents like this happen, it bubbles up and explodes. Are we capable, as a country, of confronting this debate today?
I believe we are. I believe we are capable of rising up and fighting the vice all together. But because if we don't, it's going to continue simmering under there. And before you know it, it will be really, really terrible. And we don't want to get there. We really don't want to get there. But what we need to do, we really need to invest in building Uganda, vis-a-vis building my ethnicity, vis-a-vis building, oh no, that one is not from my area. These things are happening. I don't even want to say they are quietly happening, but they are loudly happening. There are different fora, different groups where people will converge just to, meet. Oh, while I was at the university, there was a group that was the biggest of them all. And when they met, you knew that is the region that has met.
Was that in Kobazambogo?
No, it
Or
wasn't. Not at all. It was another one that is generally known to all of us. I don't want to go there. But that was a subtle way of showing me that this thing is real.
Okay.
We've tried to fight it when we eventually left university and got into employment. But it's terrible, and it's happening everywhere, in school, in workplaces. Before you get a job, or you're told her, oh, those jobs, they're not for everybody. Are you sure you're applying for that job? I wish you, your friends will even tell you, I wish you luck. So it's a subtle way, but the truth is there is a lot of grief. Because of that, we are an angry nation. Because of that, we are bitter. We are really bitter. And if people cannot be brought to, if that bitterness cannot be purged, if that bitterness cannot be dealt with, then we'll be lying ourselves, we'll be deceiving ourselves in other fora and saying, oh no, we are one, we are Ugandans. But ask anybody, what makes you feel Ugandan? You'll be surprised at the responses.
Dictor.
Do you feel Ugandan? Do you feel Ugandan enough?
Personally, I think I do. Yes, Dictor, is this something we confront? Can we deal with it? Is there space to discuss this?
Not at the moment. Like I said, and this has to do with the laws, but it also has to do with the media, because this is the kind of story that you have to discuss in a mature way. And I'm not sure our media is equipped for such. But what's true is that it's happening, and not just at a tribal level. If you go during the campaigns and go to churches these days and go to mosques and places, people are actively drumming up support, and not just local council level, even national level, member of parliament, for example. people are drumming up support for each other based on which religion, which church they go to, which mosque they go to. So this thing is growing. It's become a monster, and if we do not start discussing it now, it's going to become worse. Okay. The problem is, as Rwanda and the genocide in Rwanda has taught us, and the election violence in Kenya in 2007 has taught us, it has to be done carefully, because the media getting involved can also have consequences.
Oh, well, the Rwanda genocide and the Kenya violence was before the explosion of social media as we know it today. And I think that's significant, because if you had to rely on only Radio Mills Collins in Rwanda to mobilize the population, today there are multiple platforms to do that. How Rwanda is dealing with it is a different question, and how Uganda is dealing with it. What I think I hear you say, it's a discussion that you cannot afford to ignore completely, because it does exist. You'll meet it in subtle comments. Yes. Whether you're traveling in a taxi or in a border, you'll meet some of this discomfort, and the quicker it's dealt with. What I don't know is if the leaders in government, one, have the interest, the capacity, the believability to be able to confront this disease. I mean, this challenge. I'm afraid our time is out. We need to get out of here. May the soul of Arnold Eineviona Mugisha rest in peace. May the soul of Ramali Kamali Mukwano rest in peace, and all those dear departed during the week. And I would like to say thank you very much to Lydia Namono, Deputy Business Editor at the Daily Monitor, National Media Group. Thank you very much, Dictor Asimwe, journalist at the East African, for making time for the show. Thank you very much to the production crew that stay up late to deliver the show to you. And most importantly, thank you very much to all the viewers who stay up late to watch the show, and also those of you who give us feedback. We'll continue confronting some of these issues and discussing them on this show and on other platforms available to us. From me, it's a good night.